All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Wednesday Night Worship and the Word, and we are super blessed that you would give us a moment of your time. If you've been joining us, you know that we've been having some very important conversations, some needed conversations. We are at a moment in history, guys and gals, where we are going to see change come in some form, needed change, because we have a very clear centuries-old problem of racism in our country, and it is kind of hit that boiling point. And it's hit that boiling point before, as we know, but there's a very interesting difference, and that is the speed of information. The speed at which information travels makes this a now thing to me. And so here at Ignite Student Ministries and at the Pointe Church, if you've been paying attention and watching what the church has been doing, we've just really tried to open up the door for these conversations, and we've tried to just understand. We want to bring us an opportunity for all of us to understand that we're talking about very real people, very real pain, and very real hurt for real reasons. And so we just want to develop empathy and compassion and love for each other on kind of a more grand scale, so that someday maybe your son or your grandson doesn't have to have some of these conversations. But if you joined us last week, you heard Veronica, my friend here, talk about. Welcome back, Veronica.
Thank you.
So I say welcome back. You probably, if you are paying attention, you're gonna notice we're wearing the same outfits, but it's two different sessions. So last week we really kind of talked about your personal experiences and your what that looked like for you, how that's affected your outlooks, perspectives, and raising your son, and so on and so forth. And so this week I kind of want to shift gears and talk about creating these bridges for real change, because a lot of people, don't, and myself included, maybe don't even know what the actual change is, because this is such a foundational, centuries-old kind of thing that's been developing for hundreds of years, and as a result, it's not able to flip switch and turn it off, so to speak. And so I wanted to talk to you today about just creating those bridges, so to speak. And so I'll ask you on that note, as we really dig in to try and change this attitude, how do you see that happening in a safe way, in a healthy way? How does this, in Veronica's mind, how does this go?
Honestly, I think that there needs to be a separation. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a separation between the fight against racism and the fight against systematic racism. Yeah. Those are two totally different things. And I think that they're being lumped together as one and treated as one problem, and they are not. Being anti-racist, making the transition from racist to anti-racist, that's a heart issue. Right. You have to have a change of heart. Now, the systematic processes that are in place, that is not a heart issue. That is an administrative issue. That is a systematic issue. There needs to be papers written and signed and forms filled out and changed and things like that in order to kind of undo those type of things. And I mean, this is not going to sound horrible to say, but Joe Schmo walking down the street, driving in his car, the average everyday guy, if he hates all people that do not look like him, if he is racist, that does not affect my life in any way, shape, or form. The guy clear across the room on the other side of the highway, if they don't like me because I'm black or because I have red hair or freckles or whatever the case may be, I can't control that. Right. That's between God and his heart. That being said, redlining, real estate redlining, where you put all the black people in one area and then defund that area, that is a systematic issue, and that needs to be dealt with systematically. And we can't I can't change someone's opinion. I can't change that. I can give you knowledge, and I can give you information, and I can show you the other side of things, and I can present you with every argument as to why you should not be racist. If it's in your heart to be that way, I'm not trying to change your heart. God, if you've got to have a conversation with the Lord in order for that to take place. I do not have the power to touch someone in that way. Only God does. what I do have the power to do is petition, is to write, is to support people in legislation of any color who are about tearing down some of these racial barriers that are preventing people of all races and ethnic backgrounds to flourish equally. Now, those to me are two separate issues. So I think if you are one that feels that your fight is with racism, then fight that fight. You know what I mean? Help people change their minds, help people change their hearts. Give information to promote positive change. If you might not be able to be out there like with protest signs and risk tear gas, that might not be your thing. But at the same time, you might be able to read a book and learn about Marcus Garvey and then share that information with a child or a peer or something like that, so you can see where, yeah, we can tell them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They've been doing that for the last 200 years and this keeps on getting ruined. So you can come in and you can say, hey, Uncle so-and-so, I understand that this has been your joke for the last 20 years, but please let me explain to you why it's wrong and why it's hurtful. Like, there's that side of it. And then there's the, well, let's change the prison system. Let's change the criminal justice system. Let's change things like that. So I think the first step, separating the fight.
Yeah,
separating
absolutely.
The fight. Because as long as that racist person who feels that I'm less than a human being, as long as they're not operating on my father or bagging my mom's groceries, as long as they are able to acknowledge the fact that they have this view and don't put themselves in positions where they have to be unbiased, then I can't fight that fight for you. I can't change your heart. Just please, as you're going through this, don't put yourself in a position where you have to be unbiased if you can't be unbiased. Don't become a judge if you think that all black people are criminals. Don't become a doctor if you think that black people's skin is thicker and they can handle pain better. Look that up too. That's a fact. That is a proof. They did a study in 2015, and yes, there's a common 50% of physicians were under the impression that black women can take pain better than white women, that black people's skin is thicker, and we're less likely to be prescribed pain medication by our physicians, the whole thing. But like, if that's your place, then don't be a doctor. Right. If you are afraid of black people, then please don't be a police officer. Find another way to support your family and support your community. Yeah. If you're in a position that I don't want to say that racism is a part of your being, and I would hope that you would be open-minded enough to learn the information that you need to learn, to maybe look at things a little differently. If for no other reason, then it sucks carrying that much hate in your heart. Right. It just sucks to be that negative all the time. No doubt. Especially against an entire group of people. That's a lot of hate. So for no other reason than for your own health and well-being, learn a different way to be. Yeah. But over here on the system side, you will see redlining occur, even though it's illegal, it still happens. Say something. When you're in line at the grocery store and so-and-so can't do what they need to do, and it's clear that it's a racial issue, step in, speak to the manager, inform them that I know I love Whole Foods, but until you guys change your practices and policies, I'm not going to shop there anymore, and be okay with doing that. If there's a system in place and you have the power in some way, shape, or form to undo and to fight, find your best way to fight. It might not look like mine looks. It might be I have a different experience than you do. So your fight might be providing books to kids in underprivileged areas. That might be your fight, to bring up the reading level. Might be what works best for you. You know what I mean? But on another end, you might see that your kid wants to go into politics. Well, show them what systematic racism and oppression looks like in politics, and then help them find a way, if your family's a fighting family, help them find a way to work from the inside out. Those, I think, are the best ways to kind of start the process of kind of undoing it. But we cannot run with the agenda of changing people's minds and hearts. We do not have the power to do that. Right.
And I think, I based on my observations, I think that the systemic racism, systematic racism, how do we put that? I mentioned it. I think too many people on that but on this on the other side of things, of this whole thing, conscious or subject or not, right? I don't think that the general population understands systemic racism and understands that it is in fact very, in fact, very problematic. And you know, just like, you know, hey, right on, we got the 13th Amendment. You're going to lock you up for a decade for jaywalking. Come on. You know, it's those sorts of things that I think too many people just are unaware of.
Right.
And that's why we talk. That's why we have these conversations. This is the goal, is just to make as many people aware of these very real things. Very real. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That fight against heart, or you know, there's the racist heart, so to speak, but then there's a racist system. And in this, the fight does very much have to be separated. And as an outsider looking in, I think there's a lot of turmoil even within the protesting community on that front.
Yeah.
I see a lot of trouble unifying within that front. When you see a group of protesters protesting the same thing, and then they're protesting each other, it's a really weird and interesting dichotomy. And for someone, you know, that wants to help, that can be scary. And like, man, can I possibly get involved? And so that's where we have these conversations. And you're absolutely right that one of the very core things I feel like is separating those things, and I think it would do well for both sides to really focus on that. Because when I say even within the protesters themselves, there's kind of these individual groups formulating these individual ideologies, and you got some group out here doing this extreme thing, and because of this group doing this extreme thing, it kind of writes off so much of this good.
Exactly.
And so that's where I hope that leaders on both sides can really recognize that and address that kind of very core issue. As far as systemic changes, you know, we've seen recently in our community where we had a city council member say some very out of line things. We had caught on recording, and the people spoke up. And forced this man to resign.
Yeah.
That's how systemic racism gets addressed, I think, because he is in a position of power that creates systems or changes systems or gets rid of systems, right? And albeit on a local level, you know, there's this scales out, but I think that's kind of really systemic change is needed, and that's not trickling over to the other two gentlemen now that kind of laughed and that sort of thing. We're seeing kind of that same push, and so, you know, that's it's a non-violent and very, very effective way to create that change. Now, cancel culture is very dangerous.
Very, very dangerous.
And we've experienced it, the dangers of it, even before this current, you know, uprising, so to speak. Cancel culture can be very dangerous and sometimes unwarranted. And that's what we have to be careful. You know, having this man say this very obvious thing on video, that's stone cold evidence. However, saying I heard so and so say or do this, or and upheaving their lives. Exactly. You know, it's a tricky line to walk.
It is.
So yeah, it's but that I think that's the kind of changes that are going to eventually begin to attack, so to speak, this systemic racism.
And vote, please vote, vote. And know about who you're voting into office. Like, do your research on who your judges are going to be and who your prosecuting attorney. Like, if you're a Democrat, Republican, I don't care. Like, just don't go down the ticket and say I'm Republican or Democrat. Like, please take the time and learn, because we're having problems outside of this racial issue, especially in our county right now, with like who's doing the prosecuting and things like that. But we have to remember who put these people in office. Like, who put the judges on the bench? Who elected the sheriff? Like, who elected the prosecuting attorney? We did. So we have to be able to own part of the problem because we are either through the inaction of not voting, or through the action of voting in an uneducated manner, we are putting these people in power. And yes, I understand that polling places are being closed in Black communities, which means that 60,000 people have to go vote at one polling location. Like, I understand that those things are happening, but be willing to stand in that line.
Yeah.
If you're really fighting for change, be willing to stand in that line. If you're number 59,999, be willing to do it. Be willing to take that day off work, even if you know that you're not going to get paid for it, and go down and vote so you get to prosecute an attorney and offer that an office that fits the type of society you want to have. Maybe not your personal agenda, but the type of place you want to raise your kids in. Like, I can't stress that enough. Like, I don't even want to make this political because I'm not a political person, but I've seen some sentences in the last couple of days for people who have hurt people that were not conducive with the crime. Like, nobody should get put on probation for some of the things I've seen people do, but it's because you got a plea from either and thing. And so, if you want those things to change, vote and vote in an educated manner, and don't just vote for the president. The president is a figurehead. He is the person on the back of your coin.
Yeah.
He is not the person that makes big decisions in our country. He's the person that signs off on the big decisions that other people make. So it does not matter whose face is the face of the nation if the neck, the arms, the legs, the hands, the feet are not working towards your best interest. Who cares which face looks like if you can't walk and talk? You know what I mean? And so, like, know who you're voting in the office. If you're tired of seeing the same congressman sit on the Hill for the last 40 years, research who else is running. And if you can't find an appropriate candidate, go out and support someone who you feel like would be the best match for the community that you're in.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably one of the biggest ways that we can institute change. And don't be afraid to go to school for 20 years to become a lawyer, or to take the exam to become a sheriff, or if we as a community want to instill change, then we need to put ourselves in a position of power to make that change. There is nothing wrong with a girl going to law school and not being a defense attorney but running for judge. There's nothing wrong with that. And let her, who has lived in the community, who has experienced the Black experience, who can see the difference between somebody that is hurting and a real criminal, let her sit on it. Let her sit on it. And don't vote her out because maybe her name is too long, or if her hair is unprofessional, or she might not be a pretty shade of brown. Like, don't worry about those things. Or if he's a Black Republican, like, who cares? As long as that person has the best interest of the community at large, put them in office and give them an opportunity to instill and enact change. We're so quick to judge people. And we're so quick, like you said, like that cancel culture. I mean, guys, like, our brains aren't even fully developed until we're 25 years old.
No doubt.
Like, we don't even have control of our own. I was a moron from 19 to 29.
Amen.
Like an idiot.
My wife's watching, she's proud of you.
Like,
I was
anybody who knew me back then. You know what I mean? Stupid. And you know what I mean? So, like, maybe we shouldn't judge people on something that they did when they were 30 years ago and they didn't know any better. Maybe judge them by the content of their current character and go from there. And maybe we can stop this. Because we're, like, looking at this point for reasons to cancel people.
Right.
And not educating ourselves on maybe the messages behind those reasons. We're just deciding if they said that, so that makes them racist. And then we're not looking any further that maybe they grew up in an environment where the only talk that they heard about people outside of their ethnicity was negative talk. Maybe they are just portraying, maybe it's a little boy who's trying to be just like his dad, or a girl who's trying to be just like her mom. Mm-hmm. And that's what their mom or dad was saying at the time. And they have since learned the inaccuracy of their ways, but still they lose their whole livelihood because they didn't know any better 20 years ago. Like, if we do not want to be judged based off of what was instilled in our culture 200 years ago, 50 years ago, Because we, as a people, in my opinion, do not have the right to push that on somebody else. Like, we just don't have the right to.